السلام عليكم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, as usual, we will start with a quick Quran recitation from Brother Mahmoud. Bismillah ala barakatullah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. نحن أولياؤكم في الحياة الدنيا وفي الآخرة ولكم فيها ما تشتهي أنفسكم ولكم فيها ما تدعون. نزلا من غفور رحيم. ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين. ولا تستوي الحسنة ولا السيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه عداوة كأنه ولي حميم. وما يلقاها إلا الذين صبروا وما يلقاها إلا ذو حظ عظيم. وإما ينزغنك من الشيطان نزغ فاستعذ بالله إنه هو السميع العليم. ومن آياته الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر لا تسجدوا للشمس ولا للقمر واسجدوا لله الذي خلقهن إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. فإن استكبروا فالذين عند ربك يسبحون له بالليل والنهار وهم لا يسأمون.
التكبير. ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. May Allah bless you, Brother Mahmoud. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم. This is it.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So from the verses the brother recited, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. Allah Azza wa Jal, He speaks about the people who have said, my Lord is Allah, My Lord is Allah. And then they did something very important. ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. Then they remained firm upon this claim. When these people, they pass away, تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. The angels will come to them and will give them the best of glad tidings. The best of glad tidings. The kinds of glad tidings that would put any person at ease. أَن لَا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. You shall have no fear. So fear pertains to what? Fear pertains to that which is coming. وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. And do not grieve. That which you've left behind, that's all set too. Don't worry about that either. So they receive a glad tiding that encompasses what's to come and what they've left behind in the dunya. It is like the most incredible of glad tidings that someone can receive in that moment. So this ayah, it is, I think it is very closely linked to the subject of our talk today as well. It is about the great companion, Mus'ab ibn Umair. Mus'ab ibn Umair. And could I just get a quick show of hands? How many of you might be familiar with this name already? Might have heard a story or something about this companion, Mus'ab ibn Umair. Okay, mashallah. Mus'ab ibn Umair is a legend amongst the legends. He is from the greatest of the Sahaba. Mus'ab ibn Umair is the first ambassador of Islam. The first ambassador of Islam. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Mus'ab ibn Umair was someone who he grew up in the lap of luxury within Mecca. And people, they said about him that from amongst the youth of Mecca, there was no one who was enjoying more luxury than Mus'ab. He had the softest of skin, he had the nicest of clothes, he had the nicest of hair. People knew Mus'ab had passed by, even if they didn't see Mus'ab, because they could smell the musk of Mus'ab. They said that he used to wear like the finest ni'al, the finest slippers that used to be made from Hadramaut. He used to have the very best of it all. By the end of his life, the companions, they said that he had but one thobe. He had but one thobe that he owned. And that one thobe that he owned was not enough to cover the entirety of his body when he had passed away. They said that if they tried to cover his face, then his feet would show. And if they tried to cover his feet, his face would show. And this was someone who had it all. Had every single thing the dunya could offer to him. A handsome man, a wealthy man, had status in his community. He actually shares a part of his lineage with the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, which was a noble tribe amongst the Quraysh. So he had every single thing that anyone could offer. But despite that, he saw that there was something much more meaningful than what he had. And this thing that he came across was such that he was willing to forego all of the na'im, all of the luxuries that he had. You know, there might have been other companions that if they were to become Muslims, they may have lost some stuff, but they didn't have many things to begin with, right? They would be tortured, of course, and that's not to diminish from the great sacrifices that they made. But they didn't necessarily have as many things to lose as someone like Mus'ab. Mus'ab had everything to lose. He had the wealth and the status and all of these things. But despite having it all, he still put it all on the line. Mus'ab's mother was someone who was very keen to spoil her son. Gave him the very best. Gave him the very best that money could buy for her. And so she was particularly distraught when he comes to her and says that, you know, I want to follow the religion of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And she was willing to take the same boy that she treated with so much love and so much gentleness, too much gentleness in fact, because she had really spoiled him and turned it all the way around and said, in fact, I will jail you inside the home. And she was in fact so distraught herself that she herself took an oath that she said that she would not eat, she would not drink, and she would not ever even seek shade. She would not even seek shade. She would just stay in the sun until her son would recant this claim of faith. Until the fact that she, they even said that she would like faint from staying in the sun for too long. And there are many parents that are like this because they think that parenting is two things: to ask their child if there's food in their stomach and to put a jacket on before they go outside. This is parenting. You have food in your stomach and you're not cold if you go outside, I've done my job. This is what it means. Even if I give you the very best food and I make sure that you have the nicest shoes on and you go to the best school, this is parenting. But the deen that I give to my child, they don't view that in the same light. They don't view it with the same gravity that they view providing for their family. And Mus'ab's mother, in a sense, was very similar to this. That she was very keen to provide for her child, but she was not keen to provide for the spiritual growth of her son. So for a long time, Mus'ab, he worshipped Allah and he learned from the Prophet ﷺ in secret, until he graduated from the very first university, graduated from the very first school to produce real legends and scholars. And that was Dar al-Arqam. Dar al-Arqam, Ibn Abi al-Arqam, was that first institution that the Prophet ﷺ had, where these people were congregating with him in private, and he was teaching them the religion until they learned from the Prophet ﷺ what they needed to conceive of the religion properly and to worship Allah properly. And then it was one day when he was praying in public, and one of the companions who would later become Muslim, his name was I believe Uthman ibn Talha, he goes to his mother and his family and he opens that secret. And all of what I mentioned ensued after that, and he was punished. Eventually what happened was he was sent to Habasha. He was sent to perform perform migration to Habasha. Later on, he would also perform the migration to Medina as well. So he was someone who performed hijrah twice. And on his way there as well, much of the time that he was walking there, he was walking barefoot. Because remember, everything that he had been stripped away from him. Everything he had been stripped away from him. But he was still willing to endure all of that because he realized something very important. That this dunya, with whatever good it has, with whatever it can offer someone, it will never be worth sacrificing the faith for it. So he was willing to give it all up. And in addition to giving it all up, he was willing to go through great sacrifice and to go through great pain. Later on, he would return from Habasha, from Abyssinia, and he stayed in the company of the Prophet ﷺ until eventually the Prophet ﷺ decides to send him to Medina. He decides to send him to Medina. And this is where that title comes from, where he's referred to as the first ambassador of Islam. Now, Medina, brothers and sisters, was not what we think of it today, right? Medina became what it is today from that first flame that was lit by Mus'ab. Mus'ab is the one who prepared Medina to be the future capital of Islam as we know it. It became that place that was already established by the time the Prophet ﷺ comes to Medina. You know, we hear, the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina and there was the Ansar, those folks who were willing to receive the Prophet ﷺ. How did that happen? That came from the efforts of Mus'ab. Mus'ab was there to teach the people. what that had started from, Bay'atul Aqaba al-Ula, that first pledge of Aqaba. There was very few of the companions at that time who met with the Prophet ﷺ during the Hajj season. And remember, Hajj wasn't just the thing that the Muslims were performing at that time. Other people were performing it as well. So they could come and meet with the Prophet ﷺ even though there was a few of them. So after that, Mus'ab had been sent to them, and by the time Bay'atul Aqaba al-Thaniya came, Mus'ab had a much larger delegation. He had a much larger delegation of people that he had been teaching. And so Mus'ab, he continued to bear the difficulty that came with having had no resources at all. And one of the things that happens as well is if a person is spoiled in their childhood, then they don't develop the skills that they need to, like succeed in trade or whatever it may be, right? There's an expression that they use in Arabic, ishbatu ghar. Ishbatu ghar. You call someone that when it refers to like a plant that grows within a cave. It's very like flimsy. Why is it flimsy? Because it doesn't bear all of the difficulty of being in the sun and being in the arid weather and being in a tough environment. It doesn't grow to be tough. It doesn't grow to be tough in the way where it can succeed in any kind of environment. So Mus'ab, he didn't have the means to become a skilled trader, to become wealthy as some other companions had the ability to do. So he always kind of lived in this state of poverty after having accepted Islam. Mus'ab also fought in the Battle of Badr. He also fought in the Battle of Badr. And as you probably know, the companions that fought in the Battle of Badr are from the greatest of the companions. They're from the greatest of the companions. After the 10 who were promised Jannah, those who follow them right after are those who fought in the Battle of Badr. Because it was that first stand against the mushrikun. It was that first stand against the people who many of them were raised with. The people that they grew up in that society. They were willing to go against them in preservation of the deen. And then finally, what comes after the Battle of Badr is the Battle of Uhud. In the Battle of Uhud, Mus'ab ibn Umair, he is asked to hold the flag. To hold the flag. And the flag is very important in that time because you're not communicating as we might think to communicate now. I'm not sure how people communicate in war, but obviously they have their technology to communicate. The flag represents, we can go this far or we have to go in this direction or that direction. So it held a very important role. And on that day, Mus'ab is holding the flag with one arm and that arm is cut. And he goes and he grabs the flag with the other arm and that arm is cut as well. And then eventually he tries with whatever stubs of arms he has left to hold it until eventually he's speared in the chest. And then Mus'ab dies. Mus'ab dies. Radiyallahu anhu wa ardah. The Prophet ﷺ, after Mus'ab had passed away, it was subhanAllah, someone who all of the companions had looked at and realized the incredible luxury that he was willing to have given up for the deen. And that even that in that moment, he literally had nothing else to his name. And like we mentioned before, he didn't even have enough to cover himself. So I ask you, reflect upon that moment. What was it that Mus'ab saw about this deen that he was willing to forego it all? And what is it that we can draw upon? What can we look to in the deen to get us to understand the value that this religion holds? Because sometimes we're not even tested with nearly as much, but we're willing to throw our deen on the line. With Mus'ab, we have an incredible example of someone who, could have had it all. But there was something that he saw that was so valuable in the religion that he was willing to sacrifice it all for the sake of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ, after Mus'ab had died, he stands in front of him. He stands in front of his body and he recites the ayah, من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه. من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه. Among the believers are men who have proven true to what they pledged to Allah. فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. Some of them have fulfilled their pledge with their lives. Others are waiting their turn. They have never changed their commitment in the least. So in that moment, Mus'ab was this great example of what it means to fulfill that covenant we took with Allah. That we will be faithful to Allah Azza wa Jal. You know, someone like Mus'ab was not content having the religion, having it be a passive part of his life, but he was willing to sacrifice it all for the deen. But even that wasn't enough. Mus'ab was greedy, but in a good way. In what way was he greedy? He wanted to go to Jannah, but he wanted to take a lot of people to Jannah with him. So he called the people to Islam, and he had clarity in his understanding of Islam. Now you have people, they're medical doctors, they're businessmen, they have many accomplishments in the dunya. They can talk to someone about Islam, they don't convince many people. They may have PhDs on top of PhDs, but they talk to people about Islam, they're not able to convince them. But from amongst the Sahaba are those without their PhDs or master's degrees or certifications. They talk to people about Islam, and they would bring with them the whole village to the Prophet ﷺ to accept Islam at his hands. Because there was something of clarity that they had in the way that they preached the religion. And that clarity is the clarity of Tawheed. That what we call to is Tawheed. If you've been speaking to someone for more than 3 minutes, talking to them about Islam, and you have yet to convey to them this message of Tawheed, about the oneness of Allah, and how we only worship Allah as one, there's something wrong in how we give da'wah. There's something wrong in how we convey the religion. You're talking to them about hijab or even Ramadan, and people get so excited telling them what we do in Ramadan and all of this and that, and at the end, a person leaves thinking like, oh, that's a cool cultural tradition that they have, but they don't gain from it the understanding that, oh, these are a people that believe that God should be worshipped as one, and that they are willing to go to great lengths to sacrifice even things that are naturally desirable to themselves, and so on in that manner. So anytime we speak to people about Islam, there should be some moment in the very beginning in which we reframe things. Sometimes people might be asking you a question about a peripheral part of the religion. But wisdom in da'wah means that you understand that even though they're asking you about X, they're more in need of Y. Even though they're asking you about a peripheral part of the religion, it's your responsibility as someone that understands the religion to direct them to that which they are more in need of, even though they don't know what they need. So this is what it means to have wisdom when you're calling people to Allah Azza wa Jal. So the focus is on Tawheed. So I want us to just, this was just a brief halaqa to reflect upon this great legend. Think about all of the people and all of the deeds that will be on the scale of Mus'ab on the Day of Judgment because of what he was willing to do and what he was willing to sacrifice. We are willing to do a lot for the dunya, but we ought to ask ourselves, what are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of Allah? So this is all that I have for you guys today. But I want inshallah, if there are questions or comments, things that we can do to kind of inculcate in our children this kind of same significance of the deen, a personal significance of the deen. One that extends beyond, I as your father or I as your mother, I'm telling you this is your religion. How do we inculcate in our children, this personal significance of the deen? I think that's something that all of us need to have that answer with regards to ourselves and with regards to our children as well. How do we raise them in that way? And part of what we learned from the legacy of Mus'ab is that the focus cannot be on the dunya. That we always, just like the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions, that when they were going through difficulty, he told them, مَوْعِدُكُمُ الْجَنَّةِ, right? When some of the companions were being tortured, what did he tell them? That maybe you get something in the dunya? No. He told them, your appointed time, what awaits you is Jannah. That's what you have to work towards. What that does for us is it gives us stability through the highs and the lows of the dunya. You go through difficulties in the dunya, but you remember, this isn't my goal. This isn't my goal. My goal at the end of the day is to please Allah. My goal at the end of the day is to get to Jannah and to, inshallah, take as many people with me as possible. So I'd like to open it up to discussion for the last few minutes, inshallah. This is the wireless one, actually. Oh, we have more than one? Oh, okay. MashaAllah. We raised a lot of money this Ramadan. Alhamdulillah.
So, one thing that I agree that our focus should not be dunya, but at the same time, we should excel as Muslims. We should excel in dunya. So how to really because sometimes when we really say that focus should not be dunya, sometimes people take this as we should not even worry about or work hard, right? For dunya, we should just, I guess, how to really balance it out so that Muslim, because right now Muslims are way behind, right? And I believe that if you are strong, then you should be excelling in both ways. So maybe if you can comment on that.
So I hope you guys don't kill me for my opinion on this. Technologically, all of this stuff about how we measure success and the Muslims being behind and so on, especially if we look on a grander scale, there's a lot of reasons why Muslims are quote unquote behind that have nothing to do with themselves and a lot to do with how they've been taken advantage of by colonial powers and things of that nature. And at the end of the day, even if the Muslims in other parts of the world do not achieve technologically what other parts of the world have achieved, they will have been far more successful in the sight of Allah than those who, are able to leverage technology to do everything that technology can do. So that's just part one. I want to kind of put that to the side, that we should never assume that because so many of the Muslims die in poverty in third world countries, that these are people that have died without success. Because at the end of the day, our only metric for success is the pleasure of Allah. Number two, I totally agree with you that there is no reason why we shouldn't be able to be successful in the deen and the dunya. These are not mutually exclusive, right? In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Al-mu'minu al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allahi min al-mu'min al-da'if." Or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. That the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer. And he also said, "Khayrun nas anfa'uhum lin-nas." That the best of people are those that are the most beneficial to people. But what I see is and I'm talking about like when I see like youth, for example, they start coming to the masjid for like the first time in their life, and their parents, that first 2 days of religiosity that they have, they're so keen to say, remember, don't forget about the dunya. And you see people that are barely waking up for Fajr and their parents tell them, it's really important to be balanced in the deen, to be balanced with the deen and the dunya. And I think there, a lot of the time is like an inferiority complex, where we assume that the moment that someone becomes even slightly intrigued in practicing the religion more, we feel threatened that they might lose the dunya. I see that a lot with the shabab. And especially when parents are very keen to emphasize balance with their children that have no balance in the deen. But the moment they start practicing a little bit, their son might not be attending Jummah. Their son might be barely praying the 5 daily prayers, praying Fajr and Dhuhr together like they're traveling when they're not traveling. You know what I mean? And so when that discussion comes in to tell them to balance their deen and their dunya, this reflects more of an inferiority complex than it does a genuine concern for their children to succeed. So I hope we can kind of like hold both of those thoughts in parallel, that you can succeed in the dunya and there's no reason you shouldn't succeed in the dunya. There were people from I don't want to hold up the example of Mus'ab as an example for the pursuit of poverty. That's not what we pursue in the deen. In fact, some of the greatest of the companions were the richest of them. And through their riches, they were able to benefit the rest of the believers in a way that was truly incredible, right? One that especially comes to mind is Uthman ibn Affan, like what he did to give away his wealth, right? So there's no need for us to think of these things as mutually exclusive. But you know, something that happens is you have two kinds of people. You have those who, they say, I don't go to the masjid often, but at least I succeed in my professional field. And these people that go to the masjid, they go to the masjid because they can't succeed professionally like I succeed. And if they were able to accomplish what I accomplished, they wouldn't even have as much time to go to the masjid as I do, right? So they look, this is one group of people. The other group of people are coming to the masjid often, let's say, and they use that as an excuse to perform poorly in their work. They use that as an excuse to not deliver upon the deadlines that they have at work and to not work hard. They say, well, I don't perform like fulan or such and such person, but I'm at least going to the masjid regularly. I go to Fajr and so on. And in both of these people is a deep problem. And both end up resenting each other, you know? So we should understand that in all things there is balance. In all things there is balance, and we shouldn't make excuses for ourselves like, oh, I'm going in the masjid, it means I don't have to work as hard. Or I'm successful professionally, it means that I don't have to work as hard on spiritual actions. So I totally agree on the balance thing. I just wanted to kind of harp on a specific point that I've noticed with a lot of the kids, like the first moments that they even show some kind of interest in starting to practice the religion, the parent comes on them and says, you know, balance is very important, my son.
Thoughtful discussion. I think just following up on brother's question, I think one of the things we need to think about is what is the paradigm of success that we actually define, right? Because it's a very relative term, what success is. You know, if you look at the world and whether you succeed in it, how do you succeed also matters. And I think
One more time, how do you say?
how do you succeed matters, right? Success can be defined in various ways. You know, is it just material progress? Is it something where you see being at the top of the pyramid? I mean, to your point, it's not about just reaching the apex of the pyramid. It is about how you reach it. And also, not automatically assuming that someone who's not monetarily successful or professionally successful is not successful otherwise as a human being. And I think there's a paradigm shift that needs to occur in terms of how we define it.
So Allah defines for us success in very, very clear, unequivocal terms. And that's the kind of clarity that we seek in guidance, right? If something is to be guidance, then it should give us a very direct roadmap to what success looks like. And Allah says, فَمَنْ زُحْسِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. So whomsoever is spared from the fire and is entered into the paradise, this person will have been successful. At the end of the day, people can have business ventures that take off. And mashallah, everyone after the fact is looking at them like, oh, what kind of genius must they have been, you know? When in fact, it might have just been like, you know, that's the trend that took off. There are many elements that contribute to success, right? There are people that may have been successful in that way. Others, you know, they tried different things. Maybe they were hardworking, but eventually they just couldn't get it to work. That is forgivable. But doing the things that are required to enter into paradise and being spared from the fire, no one has any excuse from those things. That is committing ourselves to Allah. That is performing the obligations that Allah Azza wa Jal has asked of us, staying away from those things that He has forbidden of us. Whoever can do that, they will have been successful. So I think that is the ultimate metric that we have. And beyond that, of course, there are tiers and there are levels that we should all be aspiring for, to be of even more benefit to the people around us. But it should also be something that we understand. Even if we are hardworking and aren't able to achieve material success, in the sight of Allah, if we have done what He has asked of us, then that's the true success. So I think that's time, inshallah. So I appreciate everyone's attention. There's one, it'll be the last comment, inshallah. Can we pass the mic to the back?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
My question is a very general question, and it's regarding all of our females. I heard one of the lecture of Dr. Zakir Naik, and he mentioned that, and actually someone asked him a question that, should a woman work or not? And he mentioned that, women should not be working as long as the husband is making enough money to take care of the entire family. If they are struggling, then women can work in some type of place where she can work conservatively, and no interaction with non-married. Now what we see are kids, my daughter is growing up. Now the culture in America, if she marries to someone, over here, most of the kids, most of the people, they have a mindset that both husband and wife, both should work, women and men. Because they kind of grow up here, they didn't grow up back home, In this type of scenario, we are kind of like all the parents are making our kids, or especially our girls, educated. So down the line, when they get married, they also have a good future, and they can join some better careers. The divorce rate in America is very high. Almost 80% of the marriages are breaking. These are the statistics. And maybe these has grown up after, these gay culture, which has been brought up by, in the media and everywhere. So I would like to know, in these type of scenarios, should a girl be working? Should we be allowing our daughters and making their mindset from this age, from like 12, 13 years old, like, hey, you have to get educated because you're gonna get a good job. You must work towards that goal. That's it. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khairan. I did not expect this question. So I think the mic stopped working, so we have to stop. There's nothing within the Sharia that serves as a general rule that a woman is not allowed to work, right? A woman can pursue an income in the same way that a man can pursue an income, but obviously both should be looking for pursuing an income in which they earn halal from that income. It becomes even more imperative, obviously, for a husband to do it because it's his responsibility. If a woman becomes unable to do it, the man still has to go out and do it. What happens in our culture, though, nowadays, I think the way that we should approach this as a Muslim community is that we should still elevate the family above all things. Because one of the things that I think happens in motivating people to pursue professional careers is that they start to look down on the role of a mother within the family. That this person works and I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I only stay with my kids, whereas these people, they're accomplishing great things in cubicles, really curing disease and all these good stuff. But there's something about our society nowadays that tries to inculcate this inferiority in people that stay at home and tend to the family. So I think one thing that's important for us to understand is that you can pursue an income, and it's probably a good idea to seek the accreditation that enables you to do so. And I use the word accreditation very deliberately because much of what is pursued today is not an education. Education is probably more available on YouTube than in classrooms. But what we pursue in college is accreditation because you need it to get jobs. But true education usually is found outside the classroom. And anyone who's ever worked a job understands very quickly that what they end up doing on the job oftentimes doesn't relate very much to what they studied in school, right? So I think we should always be emphasizing the role that a mother plays within the family, and that it be a noble aspiration that any woman has. And that it be something that if she has the means, and if a family has the means to pursue that they do that. Because that's an incredible investment that happens within a family. If that's not something that works for their arrangement, that's okay. A woman can work and not be sinful for working, right? But I think along the lines of, and I think a lot of this comes from influence by the feminist movement, that the women saw the men working and thought we were having fun along the way. And so they pursued many of the fields that the men were pursuing, accounting and computers and all of this kind of stuff, and made to feel like this is what gives people meaning. When at the end of the day, we knew all along that it wasn't giving us much meaning, but it was putting bread on the table. So I think that's one way that we can approach it. That it's not necessarily sinful. There are people during the time of the Sahaba. Khadija was a working woman, right? But at the same time, I think there should be an emphasis on the role that a mother plays within the family, and instead of giving our children to be parented only by institutions. Allah knows best. Right? Jazakumullah khairan for your time. Barakallahu feekum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر